American Sniper. Was there a more polarizing or talked about movie this year than American Sniper? You have Michael Moore, among others, trashing it, and Fox News, among others, defending it, and meanwhile it's quickly become the second highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, behind that. The film follows Chris Kyle, played brilliantly by Bradley Cooper, a Navy SEAL and the deadliest sniper in U.S. history through his 4 tours of duty in Iraq. It opens with him aiming at a young Iraqi boy who looks like he might be about to toss a grenade at a group of U.S. soldiers. Before he decides whether or not to pull the trigger, it flashes back to Chris as a boy, learning from his father about protecting the sheep of the world from the wolves of the world. Metaphorically speaking. When Chris is older, after seeing a news story about the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Africa, he enlists in the SEALs. Shortly thereafter, he meets Taya, played by Sienna Miller, and they date and marry just before Chris is sent off to Iraq for the first time. When he comes home from his first tour, he's preoccupied with an enemy sniper and his fellow soldiers still fighting, and he remains distant from his wife and newborn son. And his aloofness and emotional distance only grow worse with each tour, but he feels compelled to return to country again and again to protect his fellow soldiers. This is a tricky movie to give an opinion on, because it seems like everyone either absolutely loved it or absolutely hated it. And incidentally, it seemed to coincide with your political leaning. So anything I say will be seen as wrong by a lot of people. I actually watched it twice before writing this review, just to make sure I was being fair to the movie. So blocking out all the buzz and controversy and talking points, as a movie I think it's pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. A lot of people are saying it retreads the same ground as The Hurt Locker, and to be honest, after one viewing, I thought the same thing. Both cover a soldier's dissatisfaction with life back home after being at war, and their compulsion to return to war. And to be honest, Kathryn Bigelow's masterpiece covers this idea with much more skill and much more subtlety. But upon further inspection, it seems American Sniper presents us with a much different scenario. Sergeant James in The Hurt Locker is bored by life after combat, and he goes back because he only feels alive when he's an inch from death defusing a bomb. Chris Kyle isn't bored with his life, he's haunted by the idea that there are men dying that he could help, and he goes back to continue protecting them. I think this movie is more straightforward than people are giving it credit for, or accusing it of. It's just one man and how he sees himself and how he sees the world. The movie doesn't cover why the US is in Iraq, or whether we should be in Iraq, because Chris doesn't concern himself with that. He's just concerned about killing the bad guy and protecting his country. While a lot of people don't believe that Chris is necessarily protecting his country by shooting insurgents in Iraq, Chris does. It's black and white in the movie because it's black and white to Chris Kyle. One man's worldview.
I'm willing to meet my creator and answer for every shot that I took.
What's not so black and white is Chris's decision to leave his family behind. Some people complain that Chris Kyle is portrayed as this infallible, perfect hero, but I think there's at least a conversation to be had about his decision to keep returning to Iraq. Some people think this is unquestionably the noble thing to do, but the movie makes a point to show Chris getting more and more detached from his family and home life with each tour of duty. His wife certainly picks up on this, and knows that it will just get worse with more and more combat. And she begs him to stay home and come back to their life together. Is he an infallible hero if he's continuously choosing to abandon his duties as husband and father? And that is my biggest complaint about the movie. These scenes at home, with Chris struggling to readjust, his wife struggling to pull him back, Chris's refusal to talk about the war, his longing to return to the war, these are easily the most interesting part of the movie. But the majority of the movie is spent actually in Iraq. And this would have been okay if it had focused on the psychology and inner conflict of being a sniper, but instead we mostly get standard war movie stuff that we've all seen before. Honestly, I think people's opinion of this movie will be colored by their opinion of the Iraq War and of the actual Chris Kyle. And while I have read some troubling things about the real Chris Kyle, I don't see any of that here. So I'm not going to judge the movie or the character based on what the real life guy may or may not have been like. To me, it's a pretty straightforward war movie with a remarkable lead performance that would have been a lot better if it had just had a different focus. Hopefully that opinion doesn't upset anybody.